The Maid's Daughter. The Maid's Daughter answered the phone out of curiosity. Unwittingly, she discovered a $1 million scheme against the company owner. She recorded everything with the help of a school notebook. And what no one expected was that she was the millionaire's own daughter. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching from. Let's continue. I promise this will be the best story you'll ever hear in your life. The Summit Enterprises building stood out in New York City's urban landscape like a monument to power and wealth. Its 70 floors of glass and steel reflected the sky like a gleaming mirror during the day and sparkled with golden lights at night. For most people, that building represented an inaccessible world of luxury and decisions that moved millions. For 10-year-old Amanda, it was where she spent her nights while her mother, Rachel, worked as a cleaner. While most children her age were asleep in their beds, Amanda explored the empty corridors of that corporate universe. The building, so intimidating during the day, transformed into her personal playground when night fell. She knew every corner, every meeting room, every coffee machine. Her mother always said, "Amanda, don't touch anything and don't make noise. We're here to clean, not to play." But how could you ask a 10-year-old child to ignore the magic of a world so different from her own? On that specific October night, the air felt heavier than usual. Perhaps it was the storm forming outside, announced by the lightning that occasionally illuminated the panoramic windows. Amanda carried her inseparable school notebook, where she drew and wrote stories while her mother cleaned the offices. "Mom, can I go to the model room?" "I promise not to touch anything," asked Amanda, her eyes shining with expectation. Rachel sighed, running her hand through her prematurely gray hair. Life hadn't been generous to her, a 35-year-old woman who seemed to carry the weight of 50. Widowed since Amanda was 5, she worked 2 jobs to support her daughter and pay the rent for their small apartment in Queens. "All right, Amanda, but come back in half an hour and remember, don't touch anything and don't make noise," the girl finished, already running down the corridor, her notebook pressed against her chest. The model room was on the 60th floor, where Summit Enterprises board planned their future developments. There, small versions of skyscrapers, luxury condominiums and commercial centers were displayed on illuminated tables. For Amanda, it was like observing miniature cities, populated by tiny people living imaginary lives that she invented. After a few minutes drawing a model of a luxury condominium in her notebook, Amanda heard a sound that cut through the silence of the floor, the insistent ring of a telephone. Following the sound, she arrived at a half-open door. A golden plaque identified it. Chief Executive Officer Anthony Mitchell. The phone continued ringing. Amanda hesitated, looking both ways down the corridor. She knew she shouldn't enter, but something pushed her forward. Maybe it was important, she thought. Maybe it was an emergency. Entering the presidential suite, she felt tiny before the grandeur of the space. A dark wood desk dominated the environment, with a leather chair behind it that looked like a throne. On the walls hung landscape paintings and photographs of Anthony Mitchell with politicians and celebrities. The phone, black and shiny, continued its insistent call on the desk. On impulse, Amanda answered. "Hello?" she said in a timid voice. There was no direct response. Instead, she heard male voices talking, apparently without realizing someone had answered. The call seemed to be on speakerphone on the other end. "Everything is ready for tomorrow. Edward." "The documents were altered as we agreed," said a deep voice. "Excellent, Michael. Old Mitchell won't know what hit him. When he realizes 80% of the company will already have been transferred. The accounts in the Cayman Islands are ready to receive the money," answered another voice. Amanda froze, her heart racing. She didn't completely understand what she was hearing, but her childish instinct told her something very wrong was happening. "And if he suspects something?" asked the first voice. "Impossible. We have Judge Graham on our side and those compromising documents about Mitchell's past. If he tries anything, we'll destroy his reputation. Besides, his secretary, Julie, is helping us without knowing it, poor thing. She's signing documents thinking they're just administrative routines." Amanda opened her school notebook and with trembling hands began to write down everything she heard. Names, accounts, plans. Her childish handwriting recorded information. That could change the fate of an entire corporation. And what about the disappearance of that manager who was suspicious? "Do you think anyone will make the connection?" asked one of the voices. "That was an unfortunate accident, my friend, and very convenient for us. Now let's finalize the details for tomorrow. The meeting is scheduled for 10, and we need—" The call abruptly cut off. Amanda stood there holding the silent phone, her heart beating so hard it seemed about to leap from her chest. She looked at her notebook, where she had frantically noted everything she could catch. Names like Edward, Michael, Judge Graham, words like transfer, altered documents, Cayman accounts, and the mention of a disappearance. The sound of footsteps in the corridor snapped her out of her trance. Quickly, she placed the phone back on the hook and hid under the presidential desk. The door opened wider, and the corridor light partially illuminated the room. "Amanda, are you in here?" called Rachel's voice. The girl emerged from her hiding place, clutching the notebook against her chest as if it were a shield. "Mom," she exclaimed, running to her. "What are you doing here? This is the president's office. You know you can't come in here," Rachel scolded, pulling her daughter into the corridor and carefully closing the door to avoid making noise. "Mom, I heard things." "Bad things," Amanda said, her voice trembling. "People are planning to steal Mr. Mitchell's company." Rachel looked at her daughter with a mixture of disbelief and concern. "What are you talking about, Amanda?" The phone rang and I answered. There were men talking about fake documents and money transfers. They mentioned a judge and talked about her disappearance, explained Amanda, opening her notebook to show her notes. Rachel examined the childish scribbles, feeling a chill run down her spine. She recognized some of the names. Edward Vernon and Michael Torres were company advisors, frequently mentioned in the meetings she cleaned after hours. "Amanda, this is very serious. We can't get involved in this. These are powerful people," said Rachel, fear evident in her voice. "But Mom, they're going to steal from Mr. Mitchell. We have to warn him," insisted Amanda, her large dark eyes shining with determination. Thunder resounded outside, making the building's windows vibrate slightly. The storm was approaching both outside and inside Summit Enterprises. "Let's finish our work and go home." "We need to think about what to do," said Rachel, gently pulling her daughter down the corridor. As they walked, they didn't notice the figure watching them from the end of the corridor, partially hidden in the shadows. Julie Sanders. Anthony, Mitchell's personal secretary for over 15 years, had heard part of the conversation between mother and daughter. She felt her heart tighten. Had she really been used in a scheme against her own boss? The storm finally broke over New York City, washing the windows of the imposing skyscraper. Inside, invisible forces were moving, and the fate of many would be decided in the coming days. At the center of it all, a 10-year-old girl with a school notebook full of notes that could change everything. The rain was still falling when Rachel and Amanda arrived at their small apartment in Queens. The clock showed almost 5 in the sea. Morning, and in a few hours, the girl would need to be at school. But sleep seemed impossible that early morning. The two sat at the kitchen table, a cup of chamomile tea between them, the open notebook revealing the notes that could change their lives. "Mom, we need to do something," insisted Amanda, rubbing her tired eyes but maintaining determination in her childish voice. Rachel ran her hands over her face, torn between fear and a sense of justice. She had raised her daughter alone since her husband's departure, teaching her values and principles, even when life proved harsh and unfair. How could she now ignore what they knew? "It's dangerous, Amanda. These people are powerful. We could lose our jobs, and then how will we pay rent, your school?" Amanda took her mother's hands in hers, small but firm. "Remember the story of Esther that you told me? She had the courage to face the king to save her people, even knowing she could lose everything." Rachel smiled weakly. The biblical stories she read to her daughter before sleeping had created deep roots. She looked at the clock on the wall and made a decision. "I know where to find Mr. Mitchell. He has coffee every Friday at that bakery near the office, alone, before everyone arrives." The plan was drawn right there, between cups of tea and determined looks. After dropping Amanda at school, Rachel would head to the bakery. It was a deviation from her routine, but perhaps the most important one she'd ever made. At Summit Enterprises, the day began like any other. Julie Sanders arrived early as always. She had worked for Anthony Mitchell since the days when the company occupied only 2 floors of a modest commercial building. Now, at 45, she was more than a secretary. She was the guardian of the secrets and schedule of the most powerful man in the company. Sitting at her desk, she opened a drawer and removed a red folder. It contained documents she had signed the previous week, routine authorizations according to what Edward Vernon had explained. But the words of the cleaner's little daughter echoed in her mind. Was it possible she had been deceived? That her trust had been used against the man who had given her opportunities when no one else believed in her? With trembling hands, she began to examine the documents more carefully. In the small bakery 3 blocks from the Summit building, Anthony Mitchell savored his espresso and leafed through the day's newspaper. At 62, he carried the weight of an empire built with hard work and sometimes difficult decisions. His austere face, marked by deep wrinkles, rarely revealed emotions. His impeccably tailored suit concealed a body still strong for his age, maintained by regular sessions with a personal trainer. That's when he noticed the woman standing in front of his table, holding the hand of a girl in a school uniform. He vaguely recognized the woman's face. She was one of the cleaners who cleaned the building at night. "Mr. Mitchell, forgive the intrusion. My name is Rachel Adams. I work on the night cleaning team at Summit for 8 years. Anthony indicated the empty chairs more out of politeness than real interest. "How can I help you, Mrs. Adams?" "Rachel Adams. And this is my daughter, Amanda." The girl looked at him with a disconcerting intensity. There was something in that gaze that disturbed him, as if he had seen it before in another context. "Mr. Mitchell, my daughter heard something last night that I think you need to know. Please give us just 5 minutes." Anthony consulted his wristwatch, a Patek Philippe that cost more than Rachel would earn in 10 years of work. 3 minutes. Amanda opened her school notebook and, with a surprisingly firm voice for a child her age, began to relate what she had heard. She mentioned the names, the accounts in the Cayman Islands, the doctored documents, the mention of Judge Graham, and even the convenient disappearance of the manager. As she spoke, Anthony Mitchell's face transformed. The initial expression of polite boredom gave way to suspicion, then concern, and finally something close to fear. "Where did you hear this?" he asked, leaning forward, eyes fixed on the girl. "The phone in your office rang last night, and I answered. They were talking without realizing someone had picked up. I wrote everything down here," said Amanda, pushing the notebook towards him. Anthony examined the childish notes. The names mentioned were people he trusted extremely. Edward Vernon had been his right-hand man for more than 20 years. Michael Torres managed the company's international investments. And Judge Graham, an old friend from college days, now in a position of power in the commercial court. "This is very serious," he muttered, more to himself than to them. "And why are you telling me this? What do you expect to gain?" Rachel straightened in her chair, a flash of wounded pride in her eyes. "We don't want anything, sir. We just thought it was the right thing to do. I taught my daughter that honesty is worth more than any money." Something in that simplicity touched Anthony deeply. In a world where everything had a price, this simple woman and her daughter offered him loyalty without asking for anything in return. "Thank you," he said, the word sounding strange on his lips, accustomed to commanding, not thanking. "I'll investigate this immediately." He stood up, leaving a $100 bill on the table to pay for a coffee that cost less than 10. "You did the right thing. Now, go about your day normally. Don't mention this to anyone. I'll contact you if I need more information." As he walked away, Anthony couldn't stop thinking about the girl's gaze. There was something familiar in those eyes, a reminiscence he couldn't completely identify. Back at Summit Enterprises, he found Julie at her desk with a disturbed expression. "Julie, cancel all my appointments for today and bring me all the documents you've signed in the last 2 weeks, everything." The secretary looked up, surprised. "Sir, I was just reviewing some of those documents. I found strange things." Anthony closed his office door and for the first time in years turned the key in the lock. "Tell me everything, Julie." The next few hours were of intense investigation. Documents were reviewed, calls made, digital files examined. With each discovery, the horror of betrayal became more evident. The conspiracy involved not only the board, but also external lawyers, accountants, and even a judge. "They planned a fake signing meeting tomorrow," said Julie, horrified by her own naivety. "I scheduled it myself, thinking it was just a formality, over a new project in Riverside. A signature that would transfer 80% of the company's shares to shell companies," Anthony completed, running his hand through his grey hair. "And afterward, I'd probably have an unfortunate accident like that manager who started asking too many questions." Julie covered her mouth with her hands, tears streaming down her face. "Sir, I swear I didn't know. They used me." "I know, Julie. It's not your fault." He paused, contemplating the window that offered a panoramic view of New York. "I need you to do something. Call Rachel Adams, the cleaner. Ask her and her daughter to come here immediately. Say it's urgent." As Julie left to make the call, Anthony opened a secret drawer in his desk and removed a yellowed envelope. Inside, an old photograph showed a young Rachel, perhaps 20 years younger, smiling next to a dark-haired Anthony. The paper was worn, as if it had been handled many times over the years. He looked at the photograph for a long moment, a whirlwind of emotions crossing his normally impassive face. Then, with a deep sigh, he put it away again and prepared for the confrontation that was to come. At the public school where she studied, Amanda could barely concentrate on her classes. Her thoughts were in the mirrored building and with the suited man who had listened to her story with growing alarm. When the coordinator entered the classroom calling her name, her heart raced. Was it because of what she had done? "Your mother is here to pick you up, Amanda. She said it's a family emergency." In the hallway, she found Rachel with a tense expression. "What happened, Mom?" "He called us, Amanda. Mr. Mitchell wants to see us right now at the company." As they boarded the bus that would take them downtown, Rachel held her daughter's hand tightly. She didn't know what awaited them, but she was sure their lives would never be the same after that day. The bus ride downtown seemed to last an eternity for Rachel and Amanda. The girl, still in her school uniform, held the notebook with the notes against her chest like a shield. Rachel tried to stay calm, but her heart beat erratically. What did Anthony Mitchell want with them? Was it a trap? Or had he really believed what Amanda heard? Upon arriving at Summit Enterprises, they were greeted in the lobby by Julie, who led them directly to the executive elevators, those that Rachel had never used, even after 8 years of cleaning the building. "Mr. Mitchell is waiting for you," said Julie, her normally composed face showing signs of tension. "He hasn't left his office since he returned from the bakery this morning." The elevator rose silently to the 70th floor, where the presidency was located. When the doors opened, Amanda felt small before the grandeur of the environment. Persian rugs, artwork on the walls, furniture that seemed to come from a palace. It was a completely different universe from the corridor she traversed during the nights, despite being in the same building. Julie led them to a large, dark wood door and knocked softly. Anthony's deep voice responded from within, and they were invited to enter. The presidential office was even more impressive in daylight. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of New York, the city extending infinitely in all directions. Anthony Mitchell stood by the window, hands crossed, behind his back. When he turned to face them, his face seemed to have aged 10 years since the meeting at the bakery. "Mrs. Adams, Amanda, thank you for coming so quickly," he said, indicating the chairs in front of his desk. "Julie, please join us." When everyone was seated, Anthony went straight to the point. "What your daughter heard last night is true, Mrs. Adams. We've confirmed everything. There was an elaborate plan to take control of my company, and probably to eliminate me afterward." Rachel paled, instinctively pulling Amanda closer to her. "My God." "Thanks to your daughter's courage, we were able to discover it in time. The meeting scheduled for tomorrow would be the moment when I would sign documents transferring controlling shares to shell companies. Carefully altered documents, which Julie was induced to prepare, thinking they were normal administrative routines. Julie lowered her gaze, the shame evident on her face. "I feel so foolish for not noticing earlier." "Don't blame yourself, Julie," interrupted Anthony. "They were extremely meticulous. The plan had apparently been in preparation for years. Edward and Michael are people of my highest trust. Edward is my godson, for God's sake. He's worked with me since he graduated from college." Silence weighed in the room. It was Amanda who broke it, her childish voice contrasting with the gravity of the situation. "What happens now, Mr. Mitchell?" Anthony looked at the girl, again disturbed by the sense of familiarity those eyes brought him. "Good question, Amanda. I have some options. I can alert the police, but that means a public scandal and probably years of legal proceedings. Summit would lose market value, jobs would be threatened. Or, asked Rachel, squeezing her daughter's hand, "or I can prepare a trap to catch them in the act. Pretend I know nothing. Attend the meeting tomorrow and induce them to reveal the entire plan while we record everything. With concrete evidence, I can turn them over to the authorities without much public fanfare." Julie leaned forward, concerned. "That's risky, sir. What if they suspect something?" "That's the risk we'll have to take, but I won't be alone. I've already contacted federal agents I trust. They'll be positioned in the building, ready to act." Amanda flipped through her notebook, thoughtful. Then she looked up with that determination that only children can demonstrate when they firmly believe in something. "It's like in the story of Esther," she said. "She also pretended she didn't know about the plan against her people until the right moment to reveal everything before the king." Anthony raised his eyebrows, surprised by the biblical analogy coming from such a small child. Rachel smiled proudly. "I read the Bible to her every night before bed. It's been our tradition since she was a baby." Something in that information made Anthony shift in his chair. He cleared his throat and continued, "Well, I'll need help from all three of you. It's risky, I won't deny it, but if we follow the plan correctly, we can dismantle this conspiracy without causing greater damage." Julie nodded immediately. "I'm with you, of course." Rachel hesitated, looking at Amanda. "I don't know if it's safe to involve my daughter in this." "Mom, I want to help," interrupted Amanda. "I was the one who discovered everything, remember?" Anthony intervened. "Mrs. Adams, I understand your concern. Amanda won't be in danger. In fact, she's a fundamental piece in this plan precisely because no one would suspect a child." He then explained his plan. Amanda and Rachel would continue their normal cleaning routine that night. The girl would accidentally leave her notebook in the meeting room where the next day's meeting would occur. The notebook would be purposefully open to a page with harmless childish drawings, with no mention of the conspiracy. It was bait. If they're as paranoid as they seem, they'll check the notebook. When they see that they're just a child's drawings, they'll lower their guard. It's basic psychology. Rachel still didn't seem convinced, but Amanda was already excited about her role in the plan. As they discussed the details, Anthony occasionally glanced at Rachel, as if searching for something in her face. There was evident discomfort. Tension that went beyond the current situation. "There's one more thing I need to discuss," he finally said, standing up. "But it's a personal matter. Julie, could you excuse us for a few minutes?" The secretary left, softly closing the door behind her. Anthony walked to a painting on the wall, moved it, revealing a small safe. He typed the combination and removed a yellowed envelope. "Rachel," he began, his voice now less firm, "how much have you told Amanda about her father?" The question fell like a bomb in the room. Rachel paled, and Amanda looked confusedly at her mother. "She knows that her father died when she was 5. A car accident. Why?" Anthony opened the envelope and removed the old photograph. He handed it to Rachel, who stared at it with wide eyes. In the image, she, much younger, smiled next to Anthony Mitchell, both in a park, hands intertwined. "You told her that her father was a truck driver, didn't you?" "That he died in an accident on the road." Amanda looked from one to the other, realizing that something very important was happening, something she couldn't completely understand. "You disappeared," said Rachel, her voice trembling with contained emotion. "When you found out I was pregnant, you simply vanished. What was I supposed to tell her?" That her father was a rich businessman who didn't want to know about his own daughter? The words hit Anthony like a punch. He staggered slightly, leaning on the desk. I never knew about the pregnancy, Rachel. You never told me. When I returned from that trip to Europe, you had changed your address, changed your phone. No one knew where you had gone. Liar, exclaimed Rachel, standing up. I told you that night before you traveled. You said you needed time, that it wasn't the right moment to have a child, that your career was just beginning. Anthony shook, his head genuinely confused. That never happened, Rachel. The night before my trip, we had dinner at that Italian restaurant near your apartment. Then we went to the movies to see that French film you wanted so much to see. At no point did you mention pregnancy. The silence that followed was laden with decades of misunderstandings and pain. Amanda looked at the man before her, beginning to understand what this conversation meant. You're my father, she finally asked, her voice almost a whisper. Anthony looked at the girl, then at the photograph and back at Amanda. The same eyes, the same face shape, even the way of tilting her head when she was concentrated. How had he not noticed before? I don't know, Amanda, he answered honestly, but I believe so. Rachel, still standing, visibly trembled. This doesn't matter now. We came here to help with the conspiracy, not to dig up the past. Yes, it does matter, Rachel, said Anthony, his voice softer. It matters more than any corporate conspiracy. If Amanda is my daughter, this changes everything, everything. At that moment, an urgent knock on the door interrupted the conversation. Julie entered, her face pale. Sir, Edward and Michael are coming up. They weren't scheduled for today, but they insisted on seeing you. They said it's about tomorrow's meeting. Anthony looked at Rachel and Amanda, and then made a quick decision. Julie, take them to the private restroom. Lock the door and don't let anyone in until I come to get them. As Julie guided mother and daughter out through a side door, Anthony took a deep breath and prepared to face the men who had planned his downfall. He would be playing the most important role of his life, the man who didn't know he was about to lose everything. In the private restroom, Rachel sat on the leather sofa, her hands trembling while Amanda remained standing by the window, observing the city below. The silence between them was heavy, laden with revelations and unanswered questions. Mum, Amanda finally said, her small voice echoing in the luxurious room, why did you never tell me the truth about my father? Rachel sighed deeply, running her hands over her tired face. How to explain 10 years of hurt and loneliness to a child? How to justify a lie that over time had become her own truth? I believed I was protecting you, Amanda. I believed that he knew about you and chose to abandon us. And now? Do you believe him? That he never knew? Rachel looked at her daughter, impressed by her maturity. At 10 years old, Amanda already demonstrated an understanding of the world that went beyond her age. I don't know, honey. It's been so long. So many things unsaid. So many misunderstandings. Julie, who had remained discreetly near the door, approached with 2 cups of tea she had prepared at the small counter nearby. If I may say something, she began hesitantly, I've known Mr. Mitchell for over 15 years. He can be tough, sometimes even cold in business, but I've never seen him lie. And more than that, in recent years, I've always noticed a sadness in him, especially on certain anniversaries. He would lock himself in his office, wouldn't take calls, sometimes just stare at a locked drawer in his desk. Rachel accepted the cup, letting the warmth heat her hands. The drawer where he keeps our photo, she murmured. Outside the room, in the spacious presidential office, Anthony Mitchell faced his betrayers with a calm that hid the inner storm. Edward, Michael, what a surprise. I thought we'd see each other only tomorrow at the meeting, he said, indicating the chairs in front of his desk. Edward Vernon, a man in his 40s, of impeccable appearance and easy smile, took the lead. Anthony's godson, he had been practically raised as a son by the businessman after his parents' untimely death. Uncle Anthony, we just came to confirm some details for tomorrow. The meeting with the Japanese investors is crucial, as you know. Anthony nodded, keeping his expression neutral. There were no Japanese investors. It was just the facade for the meeting where they would try to make him sign the fraudulent documents. Of course. Julie has everything prepared. I'll be there at 10 sharp. Michael Torres, older and with a constantly worried air, fidgeted uncomfortably in his chair. We need you to arrive a little earlier, Anthony. There are some preliminary details we'd like to review before the Japanese arrive. To make me sign the doctored documents away from witnesses' eyes, thought Anthony, but he maintained the diplomatic smile. Certainly, I'll be here at 9. Edward visibly relaxed, exchanging a quick glance with Michael. Perfect. Oh, and we brought the financial reports you asked for. They're all here. He pushed a folder across the desk. Anthony knew he hadn't asked for any report, but he took the folder anyway. Thank you. I'll review this tonight. As they chatted about corporate banalities, Anthony noticed a small, colorful object on the floor, near the side door through which Rachel and Amanda had exited. It was a pink pencil, probably fallen from Amanda's case. Edward followed his gaze and frowned. What's that? Before Anthony could respond, Edward was already on his feet, walking to the pencil. He picked it up, examining it with a puzzled expression. A child's pencil. Had visitors today, Uncle. Anthony felt a chill run down his spine, but maintained his composure. Oh, that must belong to my housekeeper's daughter. Sometimes she brings the girl when she comes to organize my apartment. The lie came easily, but the damage was already done. The seed of suspicion had been planted. Edward looked at the side door, then back at Anthony, his eyes now calculating. Strange. I didn't know your housekeeper came to the office. It was just today. I needed her to bring some documents I left at home. Michael, sensing the tension, stood up. Well, we won't take any more of your time, Anthony. See you tomorrow at 9. When the two men left, Anthony let out a sigh of relief, but he knew the danger had increased. Edward was too astute not to connect the dots. Immediately after the conspirator's departure, he called his contact at the Federal Bureau of Investigation. We need to move everything up. They're suspicious. In the restroom, the three women waited in tense silence. When Anthony finally entered, his face was grave. We have a problem. Edward saw Amanda's pencil and got suspicious. We need to leave here right now. Quickly, he explained the new plan. Instead of waiting until the next day, they would spring the trap that very night. Amanda and Rachel would continue with their normal cleaning routine, but they would be watched by undercover agents. Julie would remain in the office, apparently, working late. And Anthony would be the bait. It's too risky, protested Rachel. What if they realize it's a trap? It's our only chance, replied Anthony. If we wait until tomorrow, they might disappear with all the evidence. Or worse. The following hours were of intense preparation. Federal agents were strategically positioned throughout the building, disguised as security guards and cleaning staff. Microphones were installed in the meeting room and Anthony's office. Julie spent the afternoon cataloging all the documents she had signed in recent weeks, creating a complete dossier of the conspiracy. At 8 in the evening, when the normal workday had ended and the building was almost empty, Rachel and Amanda arrived for their cleaning shift, as usual. But this time, every movement was part of a larger plan. At 9, as predicted, Edward returned to the building, accompanied not only by Michael, but also by Judge Graham and 2 unknown men of intimidating appearance. They headed directly to the 60th floor, where Anthony awaited them in his office, apparently working late. Edward, what are you doing here at this hour? Asked Anthony, feigning surprise when the group entered without knocking. We came to advance that paperwork, Uncle, replied Edward, his smile now cold and calculating. But first, we need to have a frank conversation. The 2 unknown men positioned themselves strategically near the door, blocking the exit. Judge Graham appeared nervous, constantly adjusting his glasses. I've been thinking about that children's pencil, continued Edward, and about how strange you were today. So I decided to investigate a little. I discovered that the cleaner Rachel and her daughter were here earlier, in your office. Why? Anthony maintained his calm, though his heart was racing. Rachel has worked here for years. Her daughter sometimes accompanies her during school vacations. There's nothing strange about that. Don't lie to me, exploded Edward, slamming his fist on the desk. I know something's wrong. You know something, don't you? It was at that moment that the side door opened and Amanda entered, carrying a cleaning bucket. Her appearance clearly wasn't part of the plan, and Anthony felt his blood freeze. "Edwards?" Eyes widened at seeing the girl. "So it's you, the little spy?" One of the unknown men advanced toward Amanda, but was surprised when Rachel appeared behind her daughter, throwing the contents of a bottle directly into his eyes. The man screamed, staggering backward. The room exploded into chaos. Edward drew a gun, but before he could use it, the main door was violently opened and federal agents invaded the room, weapons in hand. "Federal Bureau of Investigation. Everyone on the ground, now!" Edward, seeing himself cornered, pointed the gun at Anthony. "You'll pay for this, old man, you and your little bastard." That's when Amanda, with a courage that surprised everyone, advanced and placed herself between the gun and Anthony. "He's my father. I won't let you hurt him." That moment of hesitation was all the agents needed. Edward was disarmed and immobilized, along with his accomplices. Judge Graham, trembling from head to toe, was already confessing everything before, even being formally interrogated. When the dust settled and the conspirators were taken away, Anthony, Rachel, and Amanda found themselves alone again in the office, now in disarray. Julie had gone to accompany the agents, helping to identify documents and evidence. Anthony knelt before Amanda, his eyes watery. "What you did was very dangerous, but also the bravest thing I've ever seen." The girl smiled, a smile that he now recognized as a version of his own. "I wasn't going to let him hurt you, not now that I've finally found you." Rachel, still trembling from the adrenaline, observed the scene with conflicting emotions. 10 years of resentment wouldn't disappear in a day, but seeing father and daughter together, something began to heal in her heart. "We need to talk, the three of us," said Anthony, standing up. "There's much to be said, much to be explained, but not here, not today. Let's go to my home. We'll be safe there." In Anthony's luxurious penthouse, with a view of Central Park, Amanda fell asleep on the sofa after the emotional exhaustion of the day. Rachel and Anthony sat on the terrace, 2 glasses of wine between them, and 10 years of silence to break. "Why did you never look for me?" he finally asked. "I did," she replied, looking at the illuminated city. 3 months after. You traveled. When I realized you wouldn't return, I went to your office. Your secretary at the time said you didn't want to be bothered with personal problems and handed me an envelope with money." Anthony closed his eyes, the pain evident on his face. "Carmen. She was always very protective. I never knew about your visit, Rachel. I never authorized any money. When I returned from Europe, you had vanished. I tried to find you, but you had changed jobs, addresses. I thought the money was your way of getting rid of me, of us. I was so hurt, so humiliated. I decided to start over somewhere else, away from everything that reminded me of you. And then, by irony of fate, you ended up working in my building years later." Rachel smiled weakly. "Life has its strange paths. When I got the job, I didn't even know it was your company. I only discovered on the first day, but it was too late to turn back. I needed the work." Silence fell between them again, but now it was different. It was no longer the silence of resentment, but of understanding that was beginning to dawn. "What happens now?" asked Rachel. Anthony looked inside the room, where Amanda slept peacefully. "Now we build a bridge. We can't recover the 10 years. Lost, but we can ensure that the next ones are different." In the weeks that followed, everyone's life changed drastically. The conspiracy was dismantled, with Edward, Michael, and their accomplices facing criminal charges. Judge Graham made a plea deal, revealing a network of corruption that extended far beyond Summit Enterprises. Anthony conducted a DNA test, confirming what his heart already knew. Amanda was, without doubt, his daughter. The paternity recognition process was discreet, away from the media spotlight that had so much interest in the corporate conspiracy case. Rachel and Amanda didn't immediately move into Anthony's penthouse, as he had suggested. Instead, they accepted a smaller apartment in the same building, maintaining their independence while building new family ties. Julie, who had been instrumental in unraveling the scheme, was promoted to compliance director of the company, with the mission of implementing mechanisms to prevent similar situations from happening again. 6 months later, on a sunny Sunday afternoon, Anthony, Rachel, and Amanda walked through Central Park. The girl ran ahead, chasing pigeons and laughing, with the freedom characteristic of childhood. Rachel and Anthony followed a few steps behind, their hands occasionally touching, a silent comfort that spoke of forgiveness and new beginnings. "She asked if she could call me Dad," commented Anthony, watching Amanda. "Said she wanted to try it to see how it sounded." Rachel smiled, a genuine smile that lit up her eyes in a way Anthony hadn't seen in more than a decade. "And what did you answer?" "That it would be the greatest honor of my life." Amanda came running back to them, holding something in her hands. It was a small wildflower, delicate and resilient, growing between the stones of the path. "Look what I found. Isn't it beautiful? It was growing in a place where no one expected anything could grow." Anthony and Rachel exchanged a meaningful look. The wisdom of the child, so innocent and at the same time so profound, touched the core of their own story. "Yes, that's exactly right, Amanda," said Anthony, bending down to the girl's height. "The most beautiful things sometimes grow in the most unlikely places." As the sun began to set on the New York horizon, the newly formed little family continued their walk. 3 silhouettes united not by the past they had lost, but by the future they were building together. The girl who had saved a corporate empire with her school notebook had done something even more important: rebuilt a family that time and misunderstandings had separated. And so, among the concrete skyscrapers and the nature of the park, between corporate power and family love, a new story began to be written. A story not of conspiracies and betrayals, but of redemption and second chances. A story that proved that sometimes true miracles happen not in grand gestures, but in small encounters that change destinies forever. The end, dear listeners. We hope that the story of Amanda, Rachel, and Anthony has touched your hearts. To continue this emotional journey, we've prepared a special playlist with equally captivating stories. Find it here, clicking on the left. If you like this narrative, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give a like to the video. Every day we bring unique stories that explore the complexity of life and the power of